Long ago, in the age when gods and titans shaped the world, there lived a figure unlike any other. Prometheus, whose name means forethought, was not only a titan of great wisdom but also a friend to humankind. While many immortals looked down upon mortals, seeing them as fragile and insignificant, Prometheus saw something different. He saw potential. He saw creatures capable of learning, building, and dreaming of more than survival. But there was one thing humanity lacked, something vital to progress in life itself: fire. Without it, their nights were cold, their food was raw, and their dreams remained distant shadows. Fire was more than warmth and light. It was knowledge, creativity, and the very spark of civilization. Yet fire was forbidden, guarded closely by the gods as a symbol of their divine power. To share it was to defy the will of Olympus, a choice that carried heavy consequences. Still, Prometheus could not ignore the suffering of humankind, nor the hope within their eyes. With courage in his heart, he carried the flame down from the heavens and placed it into mortal hands. For the first time, the darkness lifted, and humanity's journey toward civilization truly began. But such an act could not remain hidden from the eyes of Zeus, ruler of the gods. And from this moment of compassion would come an eternal sentence, one that echoed across ages. Long before the world looked as it does today, there was an age of immense power and timeless beings. This was the age of the Titans and the gods, when the earth itself seemed alive with their presence. The Titans were vast in spirit, born from the union of the sky and the earth at creation's dawn. They shaped mountains, rivers, and valleys, carrying the echoes of the earliest moments of the world. But even their reign was not eternal, for change always follows power. From among them rose the Olympians, a new order led by Zeus, the son of Cronus. After a great struggle known as the Titan, the Olympians claimed their thrones upon Mount Olympus. Zeus's thunder became the mark of authority, tying the balance of earth and sky to his will. It was a time of beginnings, yet also a time of boundaries set between gods and mortals. Mortals walked the earth below, fragile and short-lived, yet carrying the spark of promise within them. The gods watched with distance, seeing humans as fleeting shadows destined to vanish quickly. No temples had yet risen, no hymns sung, no sacrifices offered in honor of the divine. Mortals wandered vulnerable, shivering in cold nights, unable to hold light or warmth of fire. The heavens remained distant, the brilliance of the gods far beyond mortal reach. It was in this time that Prometheus, a titan of foresight, found his purpose. Unlike many of his kin who turned bitter after defeat, Prometheus chose another path. His gift was forethought, the power to see ahead and understand what was yet to come. Where others saw only weakness in mortals, Prometheus saw potential waiting to unfold. He noticed their striving, their curiosity, and the flicker of intelligence in their eyes. In their longing for warmth and light, he sensed the beginning of something extraordinary. But Zeus held another view. Mortals must remain small, dependent, obedient to the gods' will. To grant them too much would blur the line between the divine and the mortal. This was the tension of the age: immortal power above, fragile spirit below. And in the middle stood Prometheus, bridging heaven and earth with his compassion. He walked among mortals, listening, guiding, and offering the wisdom his heart carried. He saw their hunger, their fear of the dark, their endless cycle of hardship. Without help, they would never move beyond survival, never find progress or hope. Yet to aid them was to risk the anger of Zeus, ruler of Olympus, for fire was hidden, forbidden, guarded as the sacred spark of divine power. It was no ordinary flame, but the seed of knowledge, art, and creation itself. Prometheus foresaw how fire could change everything, bringing skill, culture, and innovation to humanity. Perhaps it was for this reason that Zeus kept it from mortal hands. Knowledge brings power, and power brings freedom. Freedom that might challenge the gods themselves. And so the world remained divided. Olympus above, mortals below, and Prometheus in between. The age of gods and titans was not only thunder and stars, but choices. Choices that would echo across eternity, shaping stories of defiance and sacrifice. Prometheus's choice was yet to come, but fate was already whispering his name. The tale of fire, rebellion, and eternal sentence was waiting to be written. And it began here, in the age of titans and gods, when destiny's spark first shone. Prometheus was unlike the other titans who had once ruled the world. When the Olympians rose to power, many titans grew bitter, clinging to pride or retreating into silence. But Prometheus was different. He did not see the new order as defeat, but as an opportunity to shape the future. His name, Forethought, carried the essence of who he was. Prometheus could imagine what had not yet come to pass, and he could see beyond the present. This gift made him wise, but it also made him restless, for time was always moving forward. Unlike his brother Epimetheus, whose name meant afterthought, Prometheus looked ahead. Epimetheus acted quickly and regretted later, while Prometheus foresaw outcomes before taking a step. This foresight became his greatest strength, guiding him in every decision he made, and it was this strength that turned his gaze toward humanity. Mortals were fragile, their lives brief as the flicker of a candle flame. Yet, in their fleeting existence, Prometheus noticed something remarkable. He saw their hunger for learning, their spark of imagination, their first attempts at culture. Where others saw weakness, Prometheus saw potential waiting to unfold. Perhaps they could not command thunder or raise mountains, but they could dream. And in those dreams, he sensed the seeds of greatness. Prometheus often walked among them, hidden, watching their struggles with silent concern. He saw their trembling in the night, their hunger, their fear of storms without shelter. He heard their voices uncertain, searching, longing for more than survival. A bond grew within him, like a guardian watching fragile seedlings in harsh fields. The gods of Olympus, however, did not share his compassion. They kept their distance, satisfied that mortals should remain small and obedient. To Zeus, humanity was not meant to rise. Their role was only to honor and obey. But Prometheus believed they deserved a chance to grow and create. He envisioned a future where mortals rose beyond fear, guided by knowledge and skill. In his heart, he knew progress could only come if they were given tools. And the first tool they needed was fire. With fire, mortals could cook food, craft tools, and gather around its warmth. With fire, they could shape metal, bake clay, and create art and culture. Fire was transformation. It was light in the night, and the dawn of possibility. Prometheus foresaw all this long before it happened. But foresight is both gift and burden, for he also foresaw Zeus's wrath. He knew the danger of defiance, yet the thought of mortal suffering weighed heavily. The question grew inside him: obey Zeus or act for humankind? The other gods warned him to stay loyal to Olympus, to avoid Zeus's punishment. But Prometheus was not swayed, for he saw how one act could change destiny. Quietly, he made his decision. The path was not easy, but his heart was set. He would give mortals what they needed most. He would bring them fire, and with that single act, the world would never again be the same. Prometheus's heart was heavy with the weight of his choice. He had decided to give fire to humankind, even though Zeus had forbidden it. To Zeus, fire belonged only to the gods. It was their treasure, their light, their power. Mortals, in his eyes, were too small to hold such a force. But Prometheus could not ignore what he had seen: the cold nights, the hunger, the fear that surrounded humanity. So he prepared to act quietly, carefully, under secrecy. He watched the eternal flame burning in Olympus. Its light glowed without end, untouched by time. Only the gods were allowed to use it. Prometheus stood before it, torn between awe and urgency. The fire seemed to whisper of invention, of progress, of survival, but it also echoed Zeus's warning of punishment. Prometheus foresaw both paths clearly in his mind: humanity left helpless, or himself facing wrath. And still, his heart leaned toward mortals. He devised a clever plan. A hollow fennel stalk would hide the spark. The plant stem was strong enough to carry the flame in secret. One quiet night, he approached the sacred fire. He touched the fennel stalk to its glow. The spark leapt inside, small but alive. Prometheus held it close, his heart racing with both fear and triumph. He had broken the boundary between gods and mortals. He carried the fire with care, shielding it on the long journey. At last, he reached the world of humankind. The mortals saw him approach and trembled. But when he revealed the spark, their fear turned to wonder. He set the fire before them, and the night was forever changed. Flames rose, golden and bright, pushing back the darkness. For the first time, mortals felt warmth that lingered. The cold no longer ruled their nights. They gathered close, eyes wide, hearts filled with hope. The fire crackled, and new possibilities were born. Food could be cooked, clay could be hardened, tools could be forged. They sang, they danced, they dreamed by the firelight. Prometheus watched them, proud of what he had done. This was why he had taken the risk. In the glow of fire, humanity was no longer helpless. They were creators, dreamers, shapers of destiny. But Olympus had seen the flames too. From his throne, Zeus looked down and saw fire on earth. Fury stirred in his heart, for he knew the truth. Only one could have dared such defiance. Prometheus. Thunder rolled across the heavens. Zeus had been challenged, not in war, but in compassion. The gift had been given. The secret was revealed. And now, Zeus would claim the price of defiance. The gift of fire spread quickly among humankind. Villages that once huddled in darkness now glowed with light. Songs rose with sparks, and laughter replaced fear. Prometheus's vision was alive before him. But high on Olympus, Zeus saw a different sight. He gazed down from his throne, his eyes fixed on earth. The flames in mortal hands were not nature's chance. They were stolen, tended, and cherished by men. And in those flames, Zeus saw betrayal. Thunder gathered as his anger deepened. No mortal was meant to wield such power, and no god was meant to defy his word. The council of Olympus grew tense and silent. Some gods whispered that Prometheus had gone too far. Others lowered their eyes, unwilling to speak. Athena held her counsel, wise but cautious. Hermes watched carefully, but dared not defend him. The hall trembled under Zeus's voice. Prometheus has stolen what was ours, he thundered. He has placed fire in mortal hands. Let all know this truth. None may stand against me. The gods bowed, afraid to meet his gaze, for once Zeus declared wrath, it would be done. And yet, Zeus was not reckless in judgment. He preferred punishments that echoed through eternity. A lightning bolt could end Prometheus at once. But Zeus wanted more than a single strike. He wanted a lesson carved into memory. Prometheus would become the warning for all. Word spread. Zeus would not forgive this act. The Titan, who sided with men, would pay dearly. Still, Prometheus stood unshaken in spirit. He had foreseen this moment with clarity. The storm would come, but regret never did. For in mortal hearts he saw hope alive. Yet thunder rolled, and the skies grew dark. Zeus summoned chains no mortal could break. He called his servants to bind Prometheus. There was no trial, no plea, no mercy. Only the will of Zeus, king of the gods. Prometheus did not resist their command. How could defiance stand against Olympus itself? He remained silent, eyes steady, heart strong. The chains wrapped around him, heavy and cold, symbols of torment, forged for eternity. Zeus chose no hidden prison for this fate. Not the shadows of Tartarus, unseen by all, but a high peak where sky and stone met. A place where all could witness defiance chained. There Prometheus was bound, unyielding against the wind. The cliffs howled, carrying whispers of his fate. Zeus spoke with thunder in his voice. Let all know, defiance brings only torment. And thus began the punishment of Prometheus. Yet though his body was chained, his spirit was not. For fires still burned in the valleys below. Mortals sang and dreamed by their hearths. The spark he gave them could not be undone. Prometheus, bound in silence, knew this truth. And in that truth, even against Zeus, he found victory. The winds of the mortal world carried whispers of Prometheus's fate. High upon the mountain chosen by Zeus, the Titan stood bound in unbreakable chains. The cliffs rose into the heavens. The valleys plunged below into endless depths. It was a place both breathtaking and terrifying, far beyond the reach of mortals. Here, Prometheus was left as a living monument to Zeus's judgment. The chains gleamed with divine power, forged not by hands, but by Olympus itself. No force of nature could break them. No storm could wear them away. Prometheus's arms stretched wide against the rock, his body bound forever. Yet his gaze remained unbroken, fixed on the vast world below. In the valleys, he saw the glow of fire shining in mortal villages. Each flame was a spark of the gift he had given them. The sight brought him solace, even in the silence of his chains. Though his body was trapped, his purpose lived on in the fire. The mountain became his stage, the world his audience. Mortals told stories of the Titan on the peak, punished for his gift. To them, he was no myth, but a guardian spirit and ally. Fathers pointed to the mountain and spoke of his courage. Mothers whispered his name as they tended their hearth fires. Prometheus became woven into mortal life, their chosen protector. Yet Zeus sought not only to bind his body, but his spirit. Day after day, the wind howled against the cliffs. Rains lashed him. Storms raged. Snow and sun came without mercy. Still, the Titan endured every trial that nature hurled at him. He had foreseen this fate, and he had accepted it. For one, Titan's suffering was worth the survival of humankind. What Zeus saw as punishment, Prometheus bore as a vow. He would suffer so that fire would endure. He would be chained so that mortals might live free. From Olympus, the gods looked down with mixed hearts. Athena felt quiet sorrow but spoke no word. Hermes, swift-footed, sometimes glanced toward the peak in passing, yet none dared intervene. For Zeus's decree was law, and so Prometheus remained alone upon the mountain rock. His companions were the winds, the storms, and the endless sky. Yet within that solitude, he found an inner strength. Each night, he gazed at the stars as they wheeled above. He remembered the ancient days when Titans ruled. He dreamed of futures not yet written, bright with human fire. For though chains bound his body, his mind was free to wander. He dreamed of mortals singing by their flames. He dreamed of their courage, their tools, their art. He saw their laughter and their resilience against darkness. And in those dreams, he found his comfort. Zeus could chain his body, but never the hope he carried. The Titan remained steadfast, a beacon against Olympus's power. His suffering was endless, but his resolve even greater. And though the punishment was cruel, one truth endured. The spark he had given would never fade. It would live on, long after chains and storms, long after Zeus's wrath had passed into memory. So Prometheus endured, bound yet unbroken in spirit. As Prometheus bore his punishment, the mountain became his silent companion. The winds circled the cliffs, carrying whispers from the valleys below. Snow melted in spring. Rivers flowed past his rock to nourish the land. In nature's rhythm, Prometheus found a reminder that life endured. But deep within the stone stirred another presence, older than Olympus. It was Gaia, the earth herself, mother of gods and mortals alike. Her voice was not thunder nor fire, but gentle and steady. She spoke in rivers, in trees, in the trembling of the ground. "Prometheus," she whispered softly, "you are not forgotten." Though bound, his heart lifted at the sound of her voice. Gaia had seen Titans rise and gods ascend to rule. Now her gaze turned to him, chained but steadfast. "You chose compassion. Olympus calls it defiance. The earth calls it balance." Her voice carried patience, ancient and unshakable. Prometheus closed his eyes, letting her words sink in. She did not promise freedom or release from suffering. She gave him assurance his sacrifice was not in vain. "You gave fire," she said, "but you truly gave hope." Hope, she reminded, could never be undone. Warmth spread through him, not from the sun, but from earth below. Gaia cradled him with strength that storms could not take. Every rumble of ground, every wave, carried her presence. Though chained, his spirit rose taller than ever before. Gaia spoke of mortals, thriving with the gift of fire. Villages glowed at night, hearths bright with life. Tools of iron and bronze shaped their new future. Fields blossomed, homes stood, and songs filled the air. Prometheus listened and saw visions more clearly than ever. Mankind had stepped into a dawn he had kindled. Zeus saw rebellion, but Gaia saw destiny. Mortals carried potential Olympus could never contain. "You must endure," Gaia whispered, firm as roots in soil. "As long as you stand, mortals will remember." Prometheus gazed toward smoke rising from distant villages. Each wisp was proof of warmth, of life, of stories. His suffering was no silence, but a living song. A song carried by earth, echoed by the mountains. The stars bore witness. Rivers carried his story to seas. Gaia promised his sacrifice would not fade away. In this, Prometheus found strength Zeus could not touch. Chains could bind his body. Storms could strike him down. But hope, his gift, would always endure. He was not only a prisoner, but also a guardian. His spirit, like fire, would continue to burn unseen, unyielding, as long as the world turned. While Prometheus endured his punishment, life on Olympus continued as before. Yet even in the golden halls, his story was never far from mind. Zeus's judgment was not only punishment, but also a warning to all. To defy the ruler of the gods was to face his unyielding wrath. Still, curiosity lingered in the hearts of many deities who watched. Some felt pity, others judgment, and a few held quiet admiration. Athena, goddess of wisdom, observed with sorrow in her eyes. She saw devotion to humankind, not simply rebellion against Zeus. Though she could not openly defy him, she whispered in subtle ways. She guided mortal inventors, honoring Prometheus's gift with her insight. Hermes, swift messenger, bore no malice toward the Titan. On his journeys, he often passed the mountain where Prometheus stood. Though duty bound him, he glanced toward the peak in silence. He saw a Titan chained in body but unbroken in spirit. He spoke no words but admired the strength he witnessed. Others were harsher in judgment and showed no sympathy. Hera, queen of the gods, upheld Zeus's decree without hesitation. To her, Prometheus's act was an insult to divine order. She saw no heroism, only defiance against Olympus's throne. Ares, god of war, cared little for mortals, but he approved. To him, Zeus's punishment was a display of rightful might. Yet Hephaestus, the smith, carried a heavier burden than most. It was his hands that forged the chains of unbreakable power. He had obeyed, yet sorrow weighed upon every strike of his hammer, for he knew Prometheus was no enemy to humankind. He had given tools and fire, just as Hephaestus longed to do. And so, the gods stood divided in thought, though silent in speech. None dared oppose Zeus, for his power was supreme above all. But questions stirred quietly. Was Prometheus a traitor or a guardian? Even the nymphs and spirits whispered his story through the earth. Dryads sang laments in forests. Naiads murmured in flowing rivers. The stars themselves seemed to honor his endurance from above. For though his body was bound, his tale traveled unbound. It passed from spirit to God, carried in whispers and silence. And mortals, too, joined in remembering the chained Titan's gift. Every fire that burned carried his name in unspoken gratitude. Every song sung around the hearth echoed his sacrifice. Thus, Prometheus was never truly alone on the mountain. Though chained, he lived within countless hearts, divine and mortal alike. On Olympus, Zeus sat firm, unyielding in his certainty. But even he could not silence admiration whispered in secret. For Prometheus had given more than fire, he gave a story. A story too powerful to be broken by chains or time. And as long as that story endured, so too did Prometheus. The fire had been given, and mortals rejoiced as their lives began to change. Zeus, ever watchful, could not allow this bold act of defiance to pass without answer. He looked down from Olympus and saw humans thriving with their newfound gift. No longer did they shiver in the cold or surrender their nights to endless darkness. With fire, they baked bread, cooked harvests, and shaped clay into lasting vessels. The world was shifting quickly, and it was Prometheus who had set it in motion. Zeus felt the balance of power tremble, and his authority began to waver. So he devised a plan not of open force, but of cunning judgment. It began with a feast, one that gathered both gods and mortals together. Prometheus was asked to prepare the offerings for the king of Olympus. The Titan, clever as always, accepted with a knowing and quiet smile. He believed mortals deserved more than scraps and cast-off remains. So he prepared 2 portions to place before Zeus at the table. One pile held rich, glistening meat, covered only by a rough hide. The other was bones, gleaming white, but wrapped in thick, shining fat. When Zeus came to choose, Prometheus spoke with careful words. "Great king, here are the offerings. Choose what the gods shall claim." Zeus studied both, and though he saw the trick, pride burned within him. He chose the shining fat, and inside lay only bones and scraps. From that moment, gods received husks, while mortals kept the nourishing meat. The feast revealed more than food, it marked a division of power. From then on, men offered only bones and smoke to the heavens. Zeus's eyes burned with fury, for he had been mocked and deceived. Prometheus had outwitted him before the gods and lifted mortals higher. This insult could not be forgotten, for it was pride that had been wounded. But Zeus did not unleash his wrath that very day. He waited, for patience would make his punishment strike far deeper. As the feast ended, Prometheus returned to the mortal world with ease. He saw men laughing, singing, and celebrating around the fire's glow. He felt no regret for his trick, only satisfaction at justice. Mortals had always been fragile, overlooked, and weak among creation. Now they had warmth, food, and the light of new hope. But what Prometheus did not see was the storm gathering above. Zeus never forgot, and he never forgave when defiance cut too deep. The seeds of punishment had already been planted in silence, and though Prometheus stood tall, chains of destiny had begun to form. The feast of trickery was over, but the true struggle was just beginning. The feast had ended, but the shadow of Zeus's anger still lingered in the air. Prometheus had mocked him before all of Olympus, but Zeus was patient in his wrath. He turned his gaze not only to Prometheus, but also to the mortals below. Humans had fire, food, and growing confidence, no longer trembling in the cold. They sang, built, and rejoiced. But to Zeus, their joy seemed dangerous. So he devised a punishment not of chains, but of subtle design. This punishment would arrive not as a curse, but as a gift. He summoned Hephaestus, master of craft, to shape a form from clay. With careful hands, Hephaestus molded a woman of radiant beauty. Her eyes sparkled with life. Her presence shone with grace and charm. The gods gathered, each eager to bestow their own divine blessing. Athena gave wisdom, Aphrodite beauty, Hermes cunning and persuasion. Each gift shaped her further, until she was wondrous in every way. They named her Pandora, meaning all gifted, for each god had contributed. Yet within her beauty lay Zeus's design, hidden beneath her grace. He gave her a sealed jar, warning it must never be opened. Inside lay spirits of sorrow, toil, and suffering, unseen by her eyes. Then Zeus sent Pandora to Epimetheus, brother of Prometheus, the foreseer. Prometheus had warned his brother never to accept Zeus's gifts. But Epimetheus, kind and careless, forgot all caution at Pandora's sight. Her beauty dazzled him. Her charm softened him, and he welcomed her. For a while, her presence seemed only blessing, filling life with joy. But curiosity stirred in Pandora, whispering from the sealed jar. Day by day, its mystery called to her with growing insistence. She resisted at first, but temptation grew stronger with each passing day. At last, unable to bear it, she lifted the lid. From the jar poured countless troubles, spreading across the mortal world. Sorrow, hunger, sickness, and toil filled the earth with shadow. The songs of men turned into cries of hardship and struggle. Pandora tried to close the jar, but it was already too late. The spirits of suffering had escaped, filling every corner of life. Yet one thing remained within the jar, shining faintly at the bottom. It was hope, quiet yet powerful, a light against the darkness. Zeus's plan had worked, balancing fire's gift with the weight of struggle. Prometheus gave men flame, but Zeus gave them Pandora. Mortals now lived with both joy and sorrow, both hardship and resilience. And through it all, hope remained, a flame that no god could take away. The story of Prometheus does not end with chains, but with the light he gave to humankind. His suffering mattered less than the gift that endured across ages. The fire, once stolen, could never be returned. It spread through the lives of mortals, shaping their world forever. It warmed homes, cooked food, and guided them through darkness. Through fire, mortals learned to shape metal and build cities. But Prometheus's true gift was not only physical fire, it was the spark of defiance burning in every human heart. It was the whisper that mortals could stand tall, even before gods. Zeus ruled the heavens, but he could not take back the flame. The Titan's chains were heavy, yet his legacy was light. Poets and philosophers saw him as more than a rebel. They saw a bringer of thought, of courage, of vision. Prometheus believed in humanity's potential when others doubted. That belief burned as brightly as the fire itself. Imagine a world without his gift, silent, cold, and dark. Now picture the first fire, sparks rising to the night sky. Mortals gathered, filled with wonder and possibility. Fire gave them time to tell stories and dream. It turned survival into creation, and need into culture. Prometheus's act was rebellion, but also a beginning. Though his torment was great, his hope was greater. Some myths tell us Heracles freed him from chains. Others say his pain stretched through endless time. But one truth remained. The fire was never taken back. Humanity carried it forward, generation after generation. Every invention was an echo of that first flame. Every spark of creativity was a gift from Prometheus. He lived on in every act of courage and defiance, in every refusal to bow before despair or fear. His name became a symbol of rebellion and hope, for hope itself is fire burning in the dark, and courage is the strength to endure for others. Prometheus's story asks us, what flames do we carry? What sparks will we guard, even at great cost? Power may punish, but it cannot erase an idea. His myth became a mirror of humanity's struggle, a reminder that progress often demands sacrifice, and that true gifts are not safety, but possibility. So we remember not only a titan in chains, we remember fire glowing, stories told, dreams born. We remember the courage to believe in the impossible. The story does not end with Zeus's anger. It does not end with Prometheus's pain. It ends with us carrying the flame forward. Every fire lit, every act of creation keeps him alive. Because hope itself is the eternal fire of Prometheus. And that flame, once given, will never die. The myth of Prometheus did not stop at Olympus, nor at the rocky peak where he endured his eternal sentence. It traveled far beyond, carried on the lips of poets, philosophers, and dreamers. Generations who never saw the face of a titan still knew his gift. For fire was not just warmth. It was the beginning of inspiration. When humans sat around the glow of flame, they told stories, sang songs, and imagined worlds greater than the one they lived in. Each flicker of fire became a reminder that they were more than survival. They were creators. And behind that creation was Prometheus. In Athens, thinkers spoke of him as the first teacher of mankind. To them, he was not simply a rebel. He was a guide, a protector of mortal potential. His tale grew alongside the rise of philosophy. Where others saw punishment, philosophers saw metaphor. They believed Prometheus's chains represented the weight of knowledge, dangerous, heavy, but necessary to bear. And so, his story became a mirror for all who dared to question. Artists painted him with fire in his hands, his face lit by defiance. Writers spoke of him as a friend to humanity, a titan whose suffering opened the path to progress. The myth began to breathe new life with each retelling. For in every age, people found their own meaning in Prometheus. To some, he was a hero who defied tyranny. To others, he was a symbol of the burden carried by those who bring new ideas. And still others saw him as a warning that challenging power brings cost. But one truth remained unshaken. Prometheus could not be forgotten. Even Zeus's authority, though mighty, could not erase his story. Because fire once given becomes part of all who hold it. And so, the Titan's defiance lived in every artist who challenged convention. It lived in every thinker who asked dangerous questions. It lived in every mortal who refused to bow to fear. The myth became more than a tale. It became a current, a quiet flame running through the history of humankind. Imagine the child listening by the hearth, hearing the story for the first time, their eyes wide, their hearts stirred by the courage of a chained Titan. That child would grow to see Prometheus not as distant myth, but as a voice within, whispering, "Stand tall, question, create." Prometheus was no longer only bound to a rock. He was bound to humanity's imagination. And imagination, unlike chains, cannot be broken. Even as centuries passed, as cities rose and empires fell, his fire endured. Every torch lit in the Olympic Games echoed his gift. Every candle burned in prayer carried his spark. Every forge, every lamp, every flame bore the memory of his defiance. And with each, mortals were reminded they owed their light to a Titan's sacrifice. The punishment of Prometheus was eternal, but so was his legacy. One was written in chains, the other in fire. And though the chains may rust with time, the fire will always remain. Because the story of Prometheus is not about despair. It is about endurance, about vision, about the courage to give even when it costs everything. And that is why his myth has survived, carried forward century after century into our own age. For the fire of Prometheus is not only the flame that burns in wood or coal, it is the fire of inspiration, still alive in us today. As Prometheus's story spread through the ancient world, one question lingered on every tongue. Was his punishment truly just? Zeus, king of gods, had acted to protect order. From his perspective, fire was sacred, a divine power not meant for mortals. If every gift of the gods was freely shared, what would separate the divine from the human? What would happen if mortals rose too high, too quickly? For Zeus, the theft of fire was not a simple act of disobedience. It was an attempt to alter the balance of the cosmos. Order had to be preserved, and punishment was his way of ensuring no god or titan forgot where the lines were drawn. Yet, as the story passed from lips to ears, humans saw another truth. Prometheus's gift was not destruction. It was creation. Fire did not unravel the cosmos. It brought warmth, light, and progress. Mortals ask themselves, why should such a gift demand eternal suffering? If justice was meant to be balance, was Zeus's judgment balanced, or had power blinded him to mercy? In the marketplaces of Athens, in the quiet courtyards of philosophers, debates arose. Some argued that Zeus had been right, rules existed for a reason. Others insisted the king of gods had overreached, punishing not to protect but to control. This question was Zeus just, or was he cruel? Followed Prometheus's story across centuries. It made mortals reflect on their own rulers, their own laws. When kings demanded obedience, they asked, were those demands for order or for power? When leaders punished, they wondered, was it for justice or for fear of rebellion? Prometheus's chains became more than myth. They became a lens to see power itself. And justice became more than Zeus's decree. It became a question mortals asked of every throne. Even playwrights took up the debate. In the plays of Aeschylus, Prometheus was portrayed as noble, steadfast, enduring torment, not out of pride, but for love of humanity. In these stories, Zeus appeared not as a wise king, but as a harsh ruler. The myth turned into a stage where justice itself was questioned. And perhaps this was the greatest irony of all. Zeus, who sought to prove his strength by punishing defiance, ensured that his own rule was put on trial in the minds of mortals. His eternal sentence for Prometheus became a spark of eternal questioning, not only about gods and titans, but about justice itself. Is justice only the will of the strong, or is it something greater? A balance that must be honored by all, even kings of Olympus. The myth gave no easy answer, but it invited mortals to seek one. And in that search, Prometheus's fire glowed once more, less in flame and more in thought. Because to question power, to weigh right against might, is itself a kind of fire, one that lights the way toward wisdom. Thus, Prometheus's punishment while eternal, was not wasted. It became the foundation for reflection, for debate, for the mortal pursuit of justice. And in every discussion of fairness, in every rebellion against tyranny, in every voice that dared to ask why, the Titan's legacy lived on. The story of Prometheus had reached sorrow, but myths often show that sorrow can grow into new meaning. After Prometheus was chained, humanity faced toil, hunger, and pain. Yet Zeus had one more gift to give, wrapped in paradox. It was not fire nor wisdom, but a vessel filled with unseen forces. The gods called it a jar, though later it would be remembered as a box. Inside were countless burdens, but also one bright spark hope. The jar was entrusted to Pandora, the first woman shaped by the gods. Her beauty was unmatched, her heart innocent, and her curiosity unending. She was given to Epimetheus, the brother of Prometheus. Despite warnings, Prometheus had urged his brother never to accept Zeus's gifts. But warnings fade quickly when desire and wonder cloud reason. For a time, Pandora lived in harmony with Epimetheus. She marveled at rivers, mountains, and the fire Prometheus had stolen. But her gaze always returned to the sealed jar, full of mystery. Day by day, her curiosity grew stronger, whispering questions she could not silence. At last, one morning, she lifted the lid. The world changed in an instant. Sorrows escaped, rushing into the lives of mortals. Illness, hardship, fear, envy, and loneliness spread across the earth. Pandora cried out, desperate to close the jar, but it was too late. The forces scattered everywhere, unseen but deeply felt. Epimetheus stood beside her, powerless as sorrow took root. At last, Pandora shut the lid, but one thing remained. At the bottom of the jar was a quiet, glowing gift hope. It had not escaped but stayed, waiting for humanity. Hope balanced sorrow, whispering of light beyond the shadows. It promised recovery after illness, relief after hardship, joy after loss. Without hope, even fire would not be enough. Zeus may have meant it as cruel comfort, but hope endured. Perhaps he gave more than he realized, for hope sustains all. The myth tells us life holds both sorrow and promise. Prometheus gave fire. Pandora released hardship, yet hope remained. Even in darkness, hope reminds us to hold on. And that is humanity's greatest gift of all. The tale of Prometheus did not fade with time. It lingered in whispers, told beside fires that glowed with his daring gift. Each flame was a reminder of sacrifice, each spark a fragment of defiance. Even among the gods, the sight of Prometheus bound stirred unease. Some called it justice, others felt it was cruelty. Zeus believed the punishment eternal, yet time softens even divine judgment. Mortals wove their own meaning into his story. Prometheus became a symbol of resilience, courage, and unbroken spirit. They saw in him a mirror of their own struggles. From mountain peaks to city walls, poets and singers carried his name. They told of his wisdom, his love for humankind, and his chains. He was less a prisoner, more a beacon of endurance. And woven into the tale was always a quiet thread of hope. It was said that one day his chains would fall, that one day a hero would rise to set him free. This whisper of liberation spread from hearth to hearth. It gave mortals faith that injustice could be undone. Even the will of Zeus was not beyond question. Among the gods, some pitied his torment, others admired his courage. They stayed silent, yet compassion quietly bloomed on Olympus. Prometheus endured with patience, speaking to winds, mountains, and stars. Though chained, his mind roamed free, imagining humankind's progress. He dreamed of fire burning bright, of cities growing, of songs rising. His story became not despair, but endurance and hope. Prophecy spoke of a mortal-born hero, a figure with strength of body and of heart, one who would face trials of gods and monsters, and through courage, the chains would shatter. The name of the Savior was unknown, but the promise gave comfort. If a Titan could hope for freedom, mortals too could hope. Prometheus' story carried more than fire, it carried redemption. It reminded all that no suffering lasts forever, that even the strongest bonds may break, Zeus could not silence the myth. For myths have power beyond the reach of gods. They grow, they change, and they endure. And so Prometheus endured. His tale became not chains, but a promise of freedom. Mortals told their children his suffering would end. One day the sky would see his liberation. The earth would echo with breaking chains. This hope belonged not to Prometheus alone. It belonged to all who carried burdens, to all who endured hardship heavier than their strength. His story reflected humanity's deepest truth: to endure, to hope, to dream. And so Prometheus waited, bound but unbroken, suffering, yet certain of freedom. Not today, not tomorrow, but someday. In Greek myth, even the gods could not escape a greater force. That force was fate, woven by the three sisters known as the Moirai. Clotho spun the thread of each life, the very beginning of existence. Lachesis measured it, deciding how long each thread would stretch. And Atropos, stern and unbending, cut the thread when life must end. Not even Zeus, king of the gods, could overrule their decision. Fate was not seen as cruel, but steady, impartial, and unshakable. It gave shape to life, ensuring every beginning had its destined end. Mortals walked with fate beside them, not as a tyrant, but a companion. Oedipus tried to escape his prophecy, but every choice led him to it. His story showed the Greeks that fate is not punishment, but inevitability. It reminded mortals of their limits and the mystery of the unseen design. Yet within fate's design, there was always space for choice. Mortals could not change the thread, but they could choose their path along it. Greek philosophers wrestled with this balance of destiny and freedom. The Stoics taught that wisdom came in accepting fate with virtue. Others saw fate as a call to live bravely, filling life with meaning. Even the gods themselves often bowed to the decisions of the fates. They could guide or hinder, but the final thread lay beyond their reach. Fate balanced divine power, placing order in the vast cosmos. For the Greeks, fate was not despair, but a source of comfort. If endings are certain, then beginnings shine with even greater light. If time is measured, then each moment becomes infinitely more precious. Fate is not a chain, but a frame, shaping the artwork of each life. Every joy, sorrow, and choice is stitched into the thread's long weave. Listeners of old found peace in knowing life had a greater pattern. Their struggles were not random, but part of destiny's design. The Moirai's myth endures as a story not of limits, but perspective. We cannot control the thread, but we can choose how we walk upon it. Grace, courage, and love can fill the thread before it is cut. In every myth, fate whispers its quiet reminder of time's measure. In every life, it lingers as both boundary and gift. The story of fate teaches that though our end is hidden, our journey is ours. The fates may hold the thread, but the meaning is ours to create.